everyone. Today we have our another new episodes, and we will discuss on talent, trust, and leadership stability. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Rob. Definitely, we have our honorable David Walkers. He was former U.S. Comptroller General, and he has a exclusive contribution for economics and leadership in USA and around the world. We have our IBeyond CTO, Mr. David Smith, and we have our new partners, Mr. Shaurya Patel from Australia. Thank you for joining today's sessions. First, I would like to give chance Honorable David Walker to discuss about talent, trust, and leadership stabilities. And if you share your views about USA, it will be very helpful for our other colleagues.
Well, I'll start, but I'm really anxious to hear from others because, but any event, I've had the good fortune of leading organizations in the private sector, the public sector, and the not-for-profit sector. In particular, I ran a worldwide line of business for Arthur Andersen when it was the largest accounting and consulting firm in the world. I've run three federal agencies, two in the executive branch, one in the legislative branch. I've run two not-for-profits, and I've been involved with a number of other organizations, including being chairman of the audit committee for the United Nations. In every case, I've been a transformational change agent. My view is you need different kinds of leaders at different times in an organization's life cycle. I'm not a maintenance guy. I'm a change management guy, and yet sometimes you just need somebody who's maintenance who seeks to achieve continuous improvement. You know, in my view, I'm all about mission, vision, and values. What's your mission? What are you trying to? How are you trying to improve the organization? And what are the values that guide you? Institutional beliefs and boundaries, positives and negatives, if you will. Most valuable asset any organization has is their people. I call that human capital. The reason I say that is the old term is human resources. Resources is something you consume. Capital is something you invest in, and that you can get a return on investment. And that's true now more than ever, in my view. In my case, I've had to achieve major transformational reforms in many cases. To do that, it's not just what you do, but how you do it that matters. The process is important. You don't want to fight a two-front war. By that, I mean, whenever you're making major changes, especially in government, which is not used to change, you're going to get a lot of pushback. There's a lot of people aren't going to like it because people don't like to change, especially in organizations that are basically a monopoly, and clearly government's a monopoly. At the same point in time, it goes from patience to persistence to perseverance to pain before you prevail. But prevailing is important. Last thing I would say is every organization I've run, I've had three core values for the organization. And in every case, the central core value was integrity. If you don't have integrity, you don't have much. And you've got to lead by example. You got to practice what you preach because people pay a lot more attention to what you do than what you say. In the case of GAO, the Government Accountability Office, our core values were accountability, which is what we do. Integrity is how we do it. And reliability is how we want our work to be received. There's a lot of subtext beyond that, but those are the three key things. And so I'll just stop at that. And I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody else and, engaging in whatever dialogue we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rob Enderle. How do you want to define this talent, trust, and leadership stability, which is very important right now in both in politics and corporations?
Well, Dave made some interesting points. One of them is actually backed by research. The idea that an executive isn't good throughout the entire cycle of a company is actually heavily supported by research. Typically, you have three phases a company goes through: startup phase, transition phase, and the sustaining phase. And the skill set for each of those phases is quite a bit different, and the interests are quite a bit different. So, for instance, somebody that's good at doing startups, they like the excitement, but they do tend to be micromanagers. They like familial environment of a smaller firm, and then if you try to hold on to them until the company transitions and becomes a sustaining company, they're bored. They'll often create problems. I think you can see that often with Elon Musk as he operates his companies. They tend to do a lot better when they're in the startup mode, but when they get into sustaining, they seem to have a lot of problems that seem to be directly connected to Elon Musk. And it just kind of showcases the underlying skill set didn't transition into sustaining. So you do want different people at different phases of the company. The other thing that is problematic that Dave also alluded to is referring to people as if they were just a resource, and treating them as if they're something that you can cast aside when you don't need them anymore, or hire on a whim. And the end result is an organization that lacks loyalty, lacks cohesiveness, and is anything but stable. You can see that with Intel. I think at the moment, one of the reasons that they're having so much trouble executing across a number of CEOs is because they've done so many large layoffs. There's no stability in the ranks, and the employees are always always on their back foot because they're concerned about being laid off, and so it degrades cooperation. It degrades team building. It degrades everything you need to do to have a company function. People are stabbing each other in the back because they don't want to be the ones without a chair when the music stops. And so it just creates an environment that is hostile. One of the initial rules, and David Smith probably remembers this, back when IBM did its first major layoff, was while it had really never done a major layoff before, they actually researched. I was there at the time. Actually researched how to do it, and the layoff was big. They took care of the people that were laid off. In other words, for those people that were transitioned, they were moved off the plant site immediately, but they were given offices off-site, and their entire job was to find themselves another job, another firm, and they were given the resources to do so. So that there was a huge effort to take care of those people, and the layoff was deep enough that IBM could return to a hiring mode fairly quickly. Now, they did make a number of mistakes. And it also showcases the issue with layoffs. For instance, the ES400 lines all went down because they didn't have enough people to operate them. And that was a very profitable product line for the company at the time. And it showcases the overall problems with layoffs. I tend to refer to layoffs as being the last resort of incompetent management. And for the very reason that they tend to be exactly that. If there's anything you can do to avoid a layoff and do something much more gradually, it's far better, because it's like trait triage at scale, which means you're going to make a ton of mistakes. You're going to lose people that you absolutely need, and that people that you really want to get rid of are can get lost in the noise and stay with the company and do damage. And so the end result is it becomes problematic. So if you want stability, depending on what phase the company's in, it's best to have an executive that is appropriate for that particular phase of the company. And they really have to have a certain amount of empathy. We have a habit of promoting people that are borderline sociopaths into executive ranks, and they separate themselves from the people, and they feel no empathy for the folks that they're laying off or affecting. And that's problematic because they make mistakes as a result with those very people. They're just not taking care of their staff, and their staff doesn't take care of them. The past CEO, Carly Fiorina of HP, was kind of a poster child for doing this. She treated the people so poorly that they were hunting her, and a lot of the reason she failed is because her people just did not respect her, didn't like her, and were really doing their level best to destroy her. Then she ran for Congress, and ironically, she lost by basically the number of people that she laid off plus their immediate family in California, so showing that there were repercussions for her behavior. So the end result is you want a bit of empathy in your chief executive. You want them to be aligned with the phase the company's in. And then one final thing, if you want stability, they need to have core expertise, not only in the products and product line, but they need to have at least a passing knowledge of the major functions of the company. Finance, manufacturing if you're manufacturing, software development if you're in software, operations. And by the way, I would argue today, you really want somebody that can at least spell security. because we have way too many chief executives that are in a position that somehow think that security rules don't apply to them because they're an executive, and they create their own headaches because what their behavior is emulated by others, and then you end up with a breach and a major problem. Then I'll pass to David because that's my opening remarks.
You're muted, Dr. Sharif.
Yeah, Mr. David Smith.
Well, Dr. Sharif, great topic today, particularly what's happening in the economy globally with what we're doing. And Dave, I love your background. I worked with Ira Ghosting at Anderson as I was designing In-Q-Tel for the CIA and other fun projects up there. So love your background. But as you look at what we can do with leaders to retain talent, and what Rob was talking about, IBM and HP and others, and we've seen it time and time again, is leaders forget that the human capital are people and that the human capital have families and that the organization extends beyond their human capital and to the relationships they have to their suppliers and the suppliers of suppliers. I'll give you a very interesting example of this. When I was an executive at Semitech, working with Bob Noyce there, we formed Semitech to regain the semiconductor industry back to the United States. And we worked with the largest semiconductor companies here, but we also had to create an organization called Semitech, which was made up of over 1,000 of the suppliers to the semiconductor industry. And while those were companies, the same thing applies within a single enterprise, looking at how it works with its employees and those who work with their employees. And in today's business marketplace, you have to look at the extended enterprise and not just the primary enterprises. And most of the large companies today are multinational with different cultures across their countries they operate in. They have different rules they have to keep. And all of those have to be kept in thought as they are looking at how to retain the people. And it really today, in the past, retained people often depended on perks. And today is more about trust, clarity. I hate the term, but I'm going to use it, transparency. But it's how do you create meaningful growth opportunities for the people? How do you let them share in their future so that you create a psychological safety net for them so that they can see a better engagement, and even when they're under stress. And today is a very stressful time anywhere as you look at. So as you see that is leadership hates to communicate bad news, and they often hide it. But when they hide bad news, that just hurts retention of top talent even more. So particularly with top talent, you need to communicate not only the good, but the bad as well. And let them have an opportunity to have a voice, to have a role in helping your enterprise succeed. And again, it goes back to the old days when you tended to work for a company or two your whole career. It doesn't happen anymore. When I worked with George Kosmevsky as an assistant dean of business school back 40 years ago, the statistic then was that an MBA leaving the program at University of Texas, they would probably work in 12 to 14 positions during their career. That number has easily doubled, if not tripled today. And so the change of retaining top talent is one where even the base foundation of that has changed. And so what you want to do is you want to protect the development of your people and not just the head count. You want to also keep the ability for them to do lifelong learning. both inside the company with company provided resources, but also encourage them to be a lifelong learner outside of it. From past programs with you, Dr. Shree, I even encourage my developers to take online courses and boot camps at night on weekends to help their skills. And by us working with them, providing them assistance with that, helping counsel them on that, their retention rates go dramatically up. And particularly with the fact that in today's marketplace, the life cycle of knowledge that an employee has is getting shorter and shorter because of all the advances in technology, all the advances in processes, the changing global environment, the use of AI, the expanding use of sensors, the global changes we see coming with autonomous robots and others. That is going to tremendously change what we're doing here. And so the other thing you need to do is in this one is sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. Senior leadership, executive leadership can do a lot to retain top talent. But the other key to retaining top talent is let the managers down a level, down to 2 levels, also have a key role in retaining top talent. It's just not the leadership, office of the leadership, CEO and others. It's the whole chain of the leadership that in today's rapidly changing world has to be online to retain top talent. So Dr. Shree, I think that's a pretty good answer to this first one.
Yeah, thank you. We have our partners, Mr. Saurabh Patel. Thank you for joining today's sessions. He has very extraordinary initiative with artificial intelligence and training. Saurabh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you,
Thank you.
but I cannot see you. So how
Oh,
can leaders
you-
retain top talent during period of uncertainty and disruptions as you are taking practical initiative and we are partnered with you for our CEO development program, and here is all of your colleagues who
Sure.
will join as a faculty for the CEO development program. So what's your thought? How you solve this leadership development program in Australia, in India, and this Asia Pacific region?
Perfect. Well, thank you. Look, first and foremost, it's a privilege to be here among so many leaders and just listening to your experiences and your real life stories. I am, my apologies. Sorry, can you see me there again?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, perfect. So I work for a company, the founder and a team member for a company called Skitter, which is an acronym for Skills, Training for Employability and Entrepreneurship. It's a learning and development solutions company where we custom build learning and development solutions using artificial intelligence for enterprise education institutes and schools as well. Now, one of the very important insights that we've observed and sort of is that most organizations don't fail because they lack ideas or capital. What we found that they fail because, as someone and most of you rightly pointed out, that they fail because leadership capabilities don't scale at the same pace as the growth does. The reality of what leaders are facing today across industries is, in a way, you can find or you can see a pattern. So the startups are scaling very quickly, but the maturity often lags. Enterprises are investing heavily in transformation, but sometimes they find that the culture is resisting it. At the same juncture, these are fantastic times. You rightly pointed out, I think David did that, because of AI, the middle management sort of is constantly challenged. It might be shrinking to an extent as more and more young talent, fresh talent can be onboarded, and using AI they can pretty much make a lot more significant contribution, and that sort of the gap between the top management and the entry level workers and management is kind of narrowing. Let's say if we consider what happened in many startups during the last tech boom. A lot of companies, they hired aggressively, expanded globally, and of course a lot of capital was raised. But within a few years, the attrition, they started spiking, and then we followed. So the issue wasn't ambition; it was just that the leadership was, I guess, did lack the depth and alignment in those cases. However, in contrast, then there was these companies like Microsoft where under let's say Satya Nadella's leadership, they really focused on early on learning culture and trust, and the transformation wasn't just technical; it was more behavioral, and the leaders, as you rightly said, were encouraged to learn, they were encouraged to listen and adapt at the same. So that cultural shift and then became a foundation for the long-term stability. So my initial comments are that stability today does not mean avoiding changes. I guess it means building leaders who can navigate those change and doing that without losing people's trust. So in that, what we do with our learning and development platform and the AI tools is we provide wholesome people skills, occupational skills to the existing employees as well as new talent being onboarded, so as to provide them more wholesome and full-bodied skill set as opposed to just technical skills, which then helps them, I guess, first survive and then of course thrive within the organization. So that's my initial thoughts on this. Thank you for giving me this chance. I guess I'll chip in as and when the topics progress.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable David Walker, you have a huge contribution for leadership development, policy development, and economical activities. And Honorable David, right now, even in Bangladesh, we have a huge leadership challenge. We are observing the same thing in USA, definitely in other countries in Asia Pacific. So trust is considering one of the critical component in democracy. And right now, what's your thought? Why is trust considered a critical asset in effective leaderships? How we can bring trust in the political leaders or in the corporate leader character?
Well, first, if you don't have trust, people aren't going to follow you. That's just fundamental. It doesn't make any difference whether you're in the private sector, the public sector, the not-for-profit sector. So it's a critical element. Let me give you a quick case study that combines a number of these elements that we're talking about. When I came into the government accountability feedback, when I came into the government accountability office, what you need to understand is basically a professional services organization that is wholly owned by the U.S. government. It's got lawyers, CPAs, social scientists, PhDs, actuaries, a whole range. It's comparable to a Big Four accounting and consulting firm, but it just happens to be in the government. When I came in, it had been downsized 40% in the 5 years before I came in. They had a 5-year hiring freeze, which is one of the last things you want to do if you're a professional services firm. And yet the staff didn't understand what the problem was. It was a great organization, but it was out of touch with reality. It was way too insular. It was way too activity focused rather than outcome focused. And what they didn't know that I was told when I was appointed as Comptroller General of the United States and CEO of the Government Accountability Office is it was going to be downsized another 25 to 40%. I didn't, quote unquote, turn it around. And so I came in and made major transformational changes, including developing the first ever strategic plan that had been in business since 1921. They didn't have a strategic plan. Totally restructured the organization, eliminated a third of the offices, eliminated a layer of management, consolidated 35 units into 13, modernized the human capital performance management reward systems. I'll come back to that. Did a lot more external recruiting and hiring because it was too insular to begin with. Really increased the training and development programs that we had within the agency. Changed our success measures to be outcome focused rather than activity focused, if you will. Increased transparency, which is one of the things that we're all about with regard to how we deal with our client and how we deal with the departments and agencies that we interact with. And the bottom line is that we ended up being a third less footprint, 13% smaller in staff, but dramatically improved our productivity, dramatically improved return on investment, was rated as number 1 or 2 in the government for best places to work. Just a total turnaround. Now, I left early. I had a 15-year term, and I had accomplished all but one of my objectives during the 9.5 years I was there, and I couldn't accomplish the third, which I won't go into now. And so I had to appoint my successor, and I appointed my chief operating officer, who was a 5-star COO, 5-star, okay? At the same point in time, he wouldn't have made all the changes that I made because he came up through the organization. And he would not have made all the changes, but he was supportive of the changes that were made. So when I left, Congress was very happy with GAO, and they wanted somebody who could end up staying the course, obviously with continuous improvement, but basically the transformation had occurred. And so they picked who I'd appointed as the acting Comptroller General, Gene Dodaro, very, very well deserving, because he was the right kind of person at that point in time in the organization's life. His last day in his 15-year term is Monday, and he's been at GAO for 52 years. It's the only job he's ever had after college, which, as David Smith said, is highly unusual. The only person I know who's in that category was my dad, who worked for the telephone company his entire life. That's the only. But those days are over, and I don't think they're to be repeated, whether it's the private sector or the public sector. Sorry, Dr. Sharif, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rob. What's your thought about the trust? What we are discussing right now, trust considered a critical asset in effective leadership. How we can grow these things, and specifically in corporation.
Well, I think part of it has to do with what's been said before, okay? You have to be open. You have to be honest. You have to be transparent. When I came in, I said, look, this is the situation. We've got to make major changes. Here's why we have to make major changes. Here's how we're going to go about making those major changes. And in my case, I went to every field office and met with people firsthand. They had an opportunity to make their business case before I made decisions on which ones we were going to close. And it was all related to the new strategic plan, okay, if you will. And so, I think, as I said before, it's not just what you do, but how you do it that matters. And I hope I'm not being redundant here. Whenever you make big changes, a lot of people aren't going to like it, all right? So how you go about it matters, because you don't want to fight a two-front war. And what do I mean by a two-front war? You're going to fight over what you're doing. You don't want to have a fight over how you're doing it. Just ask Germany. Most people don't win two-front wars.
Okay. Mr. Rob, you want to add any point? Rob?
Yeah, sorry, Dave just kind of stepped in there, but yeah. So we're talking about trust, and the issue with trust is whether you're talking about customers, investors, or employees, is that it forms the foundation for carrying the company forward. If the customers lack trust, they'll abandon you. If the employees lack trust, they'll move. And if your investors lack trust, they won't invest in you. And though I can point out some exceptions to the latter, because honestly, I never understood how Steve Jobs was able to attract investment after some of the schemes that he pulled and got caught with. But if you can maintain trust, then you can, that becomes a foundation for a cohesive organization. And the way and it's so easy to break trust. And one of the ways you maintain trust is you maintain communications and a certain level of transparency between your critical groups. So they're not blindsided. I remember that some of the mistakes that Microsoft made early on, for instance, with one of the networking companies back in the day, they convinced the networking company to use OS2, and they were making a major pivot, or 3Com, making a major pivot to OS2. But internally, Microsoft had decided OS2 was a dead end and wasn't going to go anyplace, largely because IBM was mismanaging it, and they weren't wrong. But the thing is they didn't tell 3Com until it blew up on 3Com, and I think the comment at the time was, well, we're all big boys. People need to understand that not everything we say is truthful. Well, you're just not going to trust them a second time. And that's, by the way, one of the reps that Apple still has is companies. The rule is you don't trust them twice, because invariably they're going to do something that you dislike, and they're not going to tell you ahead of time. And you could just look at some of the shenanigans that went on between Apple and Qualcomm and Apple and Intel to see that partnering, or even Apple and IBM. That partnering with them just does not end well for any of those companies. And IBM learned that lesson at least 4 times, which seems bizarre to me, but once again showcases that often institutional knowledge becomes problematic because the new people come in and they forget the old people were screwed, and then they go back and make the same mistake. So there's a certain amount of importance to creating stability and having people there long term. I think Dave pointed out that it's really unusual to have people in companies long term these days, and that's true. Back when I came into business, companies for life, which IBM was one of, where you go to work for them at the very beginning, and then you'd be with them until the end, and you were your pension was based on the number of decades that you were with the company, and so it made a lot of sense for you to stay with the company a long time, so to make sure that you qualified for a full pension. And you get pension and you get medical and pretty good care. Strangely enough, I just discovered the other day that at least one of my pensions at IBM survived, and so I've got a little bit of a pension from IBM from back in the day. But that's very unusual. Then we went to 401ks, and that tie into loyalty just came apart. And so now it's employees at will. You can fire employees for pretty much anything, and people do. And so you don't get the kind of stability inside the company or the kind of institutional knowledge that prevents a firm from repeating mistakes. I think the old saying is if you don't learn from the past, you're going to be destined to repeat it, or cursed to repeat it, depending on whose quote you're using. That's often the case in companies these days. The rotation in executives is so high that you don't really build up any institutional knowledge. And the hope is, of course, that AI may be able to fill this gap. And because the AIs will be in place for long periods of time, we'll gain that institutional knowledge and we'll be able to provide advice long-term based on past company experiences on what not to do and how to avoid past mistakes. The rollout of AI, though, is not giving me a great deal of confidence that that's going to be the outcome, because often people are using AI to validate decisions they've already made as opposed to analyze decisions they're considering. And the end result, it just becomes a larger circle jerk where people are just validating, post-validating bad decisions and therefore not using this information to avoid those bad decisions, which is problematic. And I think as we go forward, really looking at leaders that can critically analyze, can be critical thinkers, and can really ask the questions about the decisions they're going to make before the decisions are made, as opposed to making the decision based on their gut and then spending all their resources to argue that wasn't a stupid decision, even though in many cases it obviously was, would be a huge boon to success going forward. We really need more critical thinkers, and we lack them. And that lack of critical thinking results in mistakes and goes to I think one of the foundational elements that degrades trust over time, because if you can't believe in the decisions your executives are making, regardless of whether they're dishonest or not, you're just not going to trust them. People that repeatedly make mistakes and bad ones, like with compensation, you can see this happen almost on a cyclical basis, where executives seem to come to this conclusion that compensation doesn't matter, and they can do things like cut compensation or pull back bonuses that people have worked for, and not realizing that we did that kind of work back in the 50s and 60s, where we recognized the hard link between compensation and employees, where we discovered compensation wasn't a good motivator at all, but it was one hell of a demotivator. You give somebody more money and they didn't work that much harder, but if you took away from them something that they thought they were entitled to, you could crater their performance really quickly. And the one story I'll leave you with before I pass the baton is I owned compensation for the West Coast of the division I was in on IBM. And the one time I walked in to our division head and called him and blaming, well, actually, I was pretty verbose, but that's something you probably shouldn't do to a chief executive. But we were each allowed one free meeting where we could go in and say what we wanted without recourse, and I used mine to the hilt. But what he'd done is he'd come in and we had a sales force that was largely at risk in terms of compensation. Some of the sales reps made more than he made. And the very well paid, but all commission, very small base, very large commission, and they were very successful in terms of taking the sales away from our primary competitor was AT&T. We were chewing them up, and he came in and said, "Well, you can't have these people making this much money." So he changed it over, and he changed them to a larger base, so they had a bigger salary, but a much smaller commission, and within 2 weeks, all the top sales reps left. And then they put in people that weren't trained in the technology. And we took a company that was trending to $1 billion, a division was trending towards $1 billion in sales. This is in the 90s, when $1 billion meant something. And we took it down to $250 million within 2 months. And we still had an expense run rate that was based on that near $1 billion revenue run. So we went from marginally profitable to massively unprofitable overnight, which was the reason I went in and called the guy an idiot. We just took the head off of sales, and I've known a number of executives over the years that just fundamentally didn't get how compensation worked, and the end result was catastrophic. So back to trust, it really goes to the point of if the different constituencies can't trust the executive leadership, the company's going to fail. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And maintaining trust, building trust takes a long while. Maintaining trust is critical. And if you lose trust, it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years of dedicated effort to get that trust back. That was the lesson when IBM near collapsed in the early 90s with Gerstner. And the interesting aspect of that is Gerstner was unique in his ability to rebuild an image. He knew nothing about technology, really didn't know much about running a company, but he knew marketing, and he was able to rebuild IBM's image, rebuild how people thought of the company, surprisingly quickly by focusing on it and building a marketing organization that was at the time stronger than anybody else's. And that was a lesson that everybody seemed to forget after that, including IBM. It's kind of a sad turn of events, but I'll pass over to Dave.
Mr. David, I have different question for you. That what leadership behavior most strongly influence employees' confidence and stability as you are running your corporation as a CTO?
Great question, and actually, I totally reflect the answers that we've heard from all the other speakers today as well, and that we tend to repeat the errors of the past. But the other mistake we make, and this goes with your question you've asked here, is we need to remember why our rearview mirror in our car and our back windshield is smaller than our front windshield. It's very important to know where you've been, but it's much more important to know where you're going. And you must inform where you're going by where you've been, not let the past guide you. And to me, Sharif, that is one of the biggest answers to the question you asked. I can tell you, as I've worked with over half the Fortune 100 and many of the bleeding edge government agencies, that we have seen that, and we've seen it come back and bite organizations time and time again. I was doing futures work and doing some wicked problem roadmaps in some of the leading intel agencies. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard from pretty high level managers that we're going to outlast the leadership of this agency, and therefore we're just going to wait them out. And I've heard that in government, I've heard that in large enterprises. So there is a resistance to leadership because leadership tends to have relatively short life cycle than many of the people doing the work. And so as a leader, that's the type of behavior you have to kind of work and focus on. You can be the best leader in the world, but if your human capital doesn't agree with you, if your human capital actively works against you, which it did in many of these instances, you're not going to be successful. And it's there. The other thing that we show is that a lot of research has shown that perceived inconsistencies and volatility in leaders' behavior across situation really dramatically increases employee uncertainty, anxiety, and really loss of control in what they're doing day to day. And the day-to-day work is what generates the profit, kind of like what Rob said with the top salespeople. You need some consistency there. And if people perceive that the leaders consistently follow through on commitments, apply standards that are trustworthy, or communicate, like I said before, not just the good, but the bad as well, and have regular updates, it builds trust, it reduces rumors, it anchors the employees that they can count on. And it really moves the organization forward. And, today, particularly we hear this with AI, as we've talked about on some of your other programs in the past 3. We talk about how AI doesn't have empathy. Well, leadership has to have empathy. And too many leaders today are using AI tools to help them be a leader. And if it doesn't have empathy, you're not going to have empathy. And you've got to get that empathy in place there. You have to have the empathy, the compassionate behavior. You have to listen deeply. You have to acknowledge challenges. You have to offer practical support. And you have to be pretty decisive when you're doing that. And you have to recognize the people. When I was CEO of a couple of the companies in my past that I started, I used to tell people that my job is to help you see which mountain you're going to go take. My job is not to tell you what path to go up the mountain. If you have a problem, let me know and I'll help. But my job is to provide the vision, the mountain to go take. You have the ability to use you and your team to go take it. And I think that's part of what you have to do with this too, Dr. Sharif, is you have to have a view of how do you empower your human capital? How do you keep them up to date? And how do you use group intelligence? Being executive at a couple of the countries leading consortia at MCC and Sematech and working with others, human intelligence is where it was. If you go and look at DARPA was about human intelligence. You go and look at many of the other places like the old, wish it wasn't gone, AT&T research labs, the old IBM research labs, not what's there today. They were all about group intelligence and applying human capital. Last thing on this one, Dr. Sharif, and Rob has heard me to say this before, I'm going to say it again though. Today, we need to remember that geography is not about a physical pinpoint on a map. Geography is where you have the competencies and capabilities to achieve the goals that you need to achieve. Leadership needs to understand that today. And my human capital is not just who I can reach out and touch. It might be within my agency, it might be within my company, or it might be with partners. And you as a leader have to be able to effectively communicate, motivate, and lead across all those boundaries, or you're not going to be successful in today's world, Dr. Sri. But thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Mr. Dev, yeah. Can you unmute, please?
You're muted, Dave.
I apologize. First, whenever you're making big changes, it's communicate, communicate, communicate for all the reasons that we've all said. All right. And it's the good and the bad. It's, what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, et cetera. All right. Secondly, in government, and as I said, I've been running organizations in the private, public, and not-for-profit sector. It's particularly difficult in government because government is a monopoly, okay? And in a vast majority of government organizations, most of the people are career, not political. And yet the leaders are political. And they typically have an average tenure of 2 to 3 years. And so the career staff typically refers to them, if they don't like them, as the temporary help. And as David said, we'll wait them out, okay? In my situation at GAO, it was different because the Comptroller General has the longest term of any position in the U.S. government, 15 years, and can only be removed for specified reasons by impeachment or joint resolution of Congress signed by the president. Not going to happen. The specific issues that are there, you wouldn't have picked somebody, for the position if those kinds of things would happen. Never happened. Hopefully never will. All right. And so therefore, you've got somebody who's going to be there for a while. All right. Which is unusual in government. At the same point in time, there's only one political appointee, and that's the Comptroller General. Everybody else is career. So when you're talking about making cultural changes, which is a lot of what you're talking about here, when you're making change in government culture, it's more difficult because you're the only one that's coming in from the outside, okay, with an objective position. But look, I've appreciated being involved in this. A lot of great comments have been made, and look forward to hearing the balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our very special guest. He's a dean from IUBAT, and also Chaudhuri Kasset for joining today's sessions, and definitely Sharat Patel. So all of your experience from emerging economy from India, from Bangladesh, from Australia will be very helpful for today's discussions. I want to give chance Professor Shohidullah. Professor Shohidullah, can you hear me? Dr. Shohidullah, can you hear me? In that situation, Chaudhuri Kasset, can you share some of your views from Bangladesh? You are a corporate trainer for leadership. Specifically, we are very much concerned about the present political situations of Bangladesh. So you want to share some of your views.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. First of all, I think leadership is something that actually, I do corporate training for a lot of companies, and I always say that all the subjects that we do trainings on, it's really weird that you do trainings on all these kinds of subjects such as leadership, communication skills, stress management, and all of these things when people are working in the companies. Why are these never included in the schools? Why are these things never included in university curriculum? You will not find these kind of things being taught over years and months. What you'll have is the company sending people to do these kind of courses for 2 days and 3 days in a special sort of a crash course program. Now, the reason, because the companies don't invest in, I mean, because the society as a whole doesn't actually teach people these things from the very beginning of their life, that's why there is a crisis of these kind of skills and qualities. And leadership is one of those qualities where there is a lot of problems that people face. See, the thing is, you need to know that Bangladesh, the political situation is in a critical condition today because of the fact that most of the people who are in leadership haven't really been trained in leadership. I mean, they have just been thrown into different kinds of positions and they learned along the way and often observing very bad examples. So the thing is, if these people and people who are in politics, they become so egoistic as well that it's very difficult to teach them anything or to train them up in anything. So there should be schools where people who are interested to also be in politics should train themselves up. So those kind of things are not there. So that's why there is a big crisis of leadership. I think not only in Bangladesh but in many countries. I think a lot of big countries who used to be viewed upon as having great leadership over the years and decades and in recent times are manifesting that there isn't that great leadership in those countries also. Countries that people would look forward to, we suddenly see that they are not so much countries to be looked forward to be looked up to anymore. So there is a general leadership crisis all over the world. I just want to add another thing that we were having a lot of discussions about trust and organizations, and that is true with companies, that is true with government, with anything and everything. People are highly unreliable. They've become unreliable and they've been trained by life to become unreliable because people get cheated on so badly, bluffed and misled so many times that even the people who come with a certain degree of ethics into whatever industry or field that they get into, they eventually feel that if everybody is elbowing me around, then I need to start doing the same. And that's where the cascade begins to actually just bump each other off. And that's how each other we learn to cheat one another. And that's the cycle that we are trapped in. And in the companies, people, the leaders, they actually do in many cases mislead the juniors. Not only in companies, in big organizations, in governments, in ministries. A lot of the people, they always think that it is something to take a lot of pride in and take a lot of credit if they can manage to mislead someone else. They take a lot of pride in being able to bluff their way through. So, I mean, this is not just in Bangladesh. It's a very common practice to take pride in being able to take shortcuts and being able to mislead someone else and achieve something. So when you take pride and if that becomes like a culture, then automatically people who work under you, people at the junior levels, they will not trust you. And that's why the companies are also the organizations, not just companies, all organizations, institutions, they're falling apart because everybody working over there, they do not put in their wholehearted effort into anything that they're doing because they don't believe what the leaders are telling them. They don't believe that the leaders are preparing safety nets for them. And if something goes wrong, they will be taken care of. Nobody actually takes care of the juniors. So the loyalty reduces, as it has been said. Organizations fire people left, right, and center. Why will people remain faithful to those kinds of organizations? So these are all the kind of problems which are there. And it's very difficult. It's like a cycle. And it's extremely difficult to pick one point and say that the problem starts from here. But even then, you've got to pick some place and start doing the fixing work. And you have to expect that the rest of the cycle will follow through.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. We have our Professor Shohidullah from IUBET. He is a Dean of Business School. Professor Shohidullah, how you want to share your views in terms of talent, trust, and leadership? Can you unmute, please? Can you unmute, please? Uh, Professor Shohidullah, can you unmute, please? In that situation, I want to give chance Mr. Saurav Patel as World Talent Economic Forums and your Skitry AI. We are working together for the CEO development program, this leadership program, and you see all of the famous peoples in our team, those who train the youth, corporations, academia. They have a huge experience to develop government agency, corporation, and academia. So, what's your thoughts about organizational culture?
Sure. So I'll just, I guess, throw some light on, where the learning, governance, and strategy, they kind of converge. From my thoughts are the learning and development is, I guess, no longer, it cannot operate as a support function. It has to have more of a strategic engine for trust, governance, and long-term performance. I'll give you a quick example of, I think we all touched upon, trust, and trust is, I guess, the most important element, especially under pressure. So we ourselves, when the pandemic hit, that was we opened our company in 2019 in Australia. In 20 is when we were going to open our Indian chapter, and we had a massive contract that we were about to land. And this is April 2020, which is when we ourselves went through a lockdown. India had gone through a lockdown. I had a team of people, engineers who were working out there. I think very important point. I think Dave, or one of the gentlemen here mentioned that that is where, I guess, a very transparent communication and empathy and of course honesty is needed. And that was the only way I could deal with it. And I sort of, that is when we experienced that because I dealt with honesty. Of course, there was a few people that we lost, but the ones who stayed back, they're still working with us. Those kind of defining moments, they really taught the true meaning of trust and true meaning of leadership, because it is oftentimes very undervalued. The trust in a leadership as a leadership strategy or leadership quality. So as Skitter, what I think, just to touch upon, what we do, how we teach, I guess these are all teachable skills, and learnability is, of course, one of the superpowers or super skill that would be needed for at least for the decade, with all the automation, AI, robotics, everything else that is emerging. Human skills are going to become very, very important. Something which I recently found out was contrary to a lot of I guess common understanding that in previous time there is they used to say that an average job would require 30% of human to human communication. With the advent of AI and automation, I would say that has now increased to 70%. So contrary to what a lot of people think, that the automation and automating workflows will require a lot less human communication, where it's the other way around. So I guess what we at Skitter, we are working on three elements. So we are obviously very importantly breaking down, chunking down topics into micro learning, bite-sized learning, because that's what the current audience and the incoming generation, that's how they learn. So that's one way. So teaching leadership would also mean that we then chunk it down and break it down into small little micro nuggets for them to then consume and understand, and of course directly link it to the business outcomes. The second element is, or the pillar is, where we build our AI tools that allow us to do personalized adaptive learning pathways for learners, which I think, just to address, someone else mentioned that, how it is important that learning is so individualistic and so specific to separate, type of learners. It's important that, and with AI, that is now a possibility, that, it can, using real life or real leadership scenarios, we can teach those leadership skills. And finally, I guess the third element is the intelligence that the entire platform generates. That is, I guess, the most important element of our platform, because that reinforces the accountability, the transparency, and everything. So learning is when it is embedded into leadership. The organizations just don't react to change. They can build that institutional muscle memory that is needed, and that's what Skitter or at Skitter we do. So that's pretty much, I wanted to say in terms of our initiative with you, Dr. Sharif, and this is where our platform will then be able to democratize leadership skills, and of course, along with that, every other human skills that we possibly can, teach.
Thank you, Mr. Sharad. I really impressed by his platform, and he has contributions with IIT Madras and all of the famous universities in India, in Singapore, in Australia, and many largest corporation. We want to invite another professors, Professor Shohidullah. They have a different concept with the university. They are promoting education in 68,000 villages. So, Professor Shohidullah, what
Yes.
you want to share about leadership in terms of your IUBET model and
Yeah.
trust for our speakers and for our audience?
Thank you very much for giving me a chance. I am Professor Dr. Shohidullah Mia. Shortly, we can say Professor Mia. Professor Dr. Mia. And basically, I am working at the IUBT. The name is International University of Business, Agriculture and Technology. The name of the university is University of Technology. And we are located at Dhaka, Uttara. And we are working, basically working on climate change. And I'm also working on the agribusiness and organic food production. And we are producing on carbon business, trying to develop the center of excellence on carbon business center. And we are working on basically climate change, because the Bangladesh is very highly affected by the frequent flood, cyclone, and we are trying to see the northwest part near of Bay of Bengal, the effect of the salinity, effect of the climate change, crop production trends, and coastal aquaculture systems. And at the same time, you also know that Bangladesh is a rising situation for the industry of the textile sector. But the textile sector is rising, textile sector is working highly, performing well, but they are destroying for making their business, they are not treating the wastewater, and they are directly discharging to the wastewater. And the serious chemical compounds is affecting to our river system, affecting to our rivers, affecting to our crop production. So the Bangladesh is huge population density, at the same time reducing the land area, polluting the river fish quality. Ultimately, we have to face a serious problem for the production of the agricultural crop production. At the same time, we are also facing for the climate change, especially southern part of Bangladesh. So I'm basically working on these two disciplines, trying to recover the situation from textile industry, chemical pollution load, and also I'm working on the climate change adaptation of the crop, adaptation of the aquaculture system, coastal aquaculture system, and also producing the organic food production. And I'm trying to develop the carbon trade. That's why I'm a new member of the World Talent Economy Forum. I hope in future I can contribute more with this situation in Bangladesh. At the university, we have 10,000 students. We are world-ranking university, and we are trying to develop a graduate from each of the villages of Bangladesh that will contribute to the nation, contribute to the higher education, and by which our country will be the educated. We are trying to be as a sample. We are trying to teach the students as a government private university. Sometimes we are providing free of free of cost talent student, free of cost of the tuition fees. Because of the talent, we are holding the talent student. The talent must be contribute to the nation. It is the one of the view of the university human resource development. We are providing free of fund for the scholarship for educated the talent student. We are not taking any money for the talent student. That is our view also.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. With our Center of Excellence, with all of our experts from around the world, hopefully we can bring more progress for your grassroots level concept. So I have to go for closing the session, but I have few questions. Even audience like to this session very much. Honorable David Walker, what strategies help organization prepare future leader to ensure continuity and stability? You get a very interesting point from Bangladesh, from India, and from Australia. So what's your thought? Can you unmute, please?
We've talked about a number of the elements here already, and that is, you need to have a plan. You need to have mission, vision, values. You need to be transparent. You need to be honest. You need to have integrity. You need to communicate. You need to have credibility with regard to the area that you're leading. Have some knowledge and experience. You need to have empathy. Sometimes you have to end up making tough decisions, and that can end up having adverse impacts on individuals. And you need to be able to treat them fairly with respect and have empathy for their situation. So basically, a number of us have said similar things, which I think to me is good because there's agreement on a number of the key elements that are necessary in order to be an effective leader. Last thing I would say is, for any system to work, and this isn't necessarily a person, it's an entity, you've got to have properly designed incentives to encourage people to do the right thing. You've got to have adequate transparency to provide reasonable assurance they will, because a variety of people are looking. And you have to have appropriate accountability if they don't, although recognition and rewards if they do. If you don't have those three things, the system will not succeed. Doesn't make any difference what type of system or what sector of the economy. And I'll leave on this. In the United States, our healthcare system, our K through 12 education system, our immigration system, and I could go on, are 0 for 3. That's a strikeout. So it's no wonder we have a problem, and we need to make major transformational changes, not nip and tuck, major reconstructive surgery, and we need to start sooner rather than later. And the biggest deficit, in my opinion, we have in the United States, in many regards, is a leadership deficit.
Thank you. That's why our World Talent Economic Forum, with California Institute of Management, with UN University Japan, together we developed this leadership development program with the expertise of USA, expert of Japan, and expert from emerging economy. So everybody can, when the global north and global south come together, it's create more value, more knowledge, more productivity. So someone bring the technology, someone bring knowledge, someone bring culture, someone bring the research and innovations. That is the way we can develop as a global citizen, and we can make more productive. So Mr. Rob Enderle, what's your thoughts and what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, closing remarks. If you really want to build an organization that's going to last, I would say the one thing that's not done that should be done is succession planning. What we often have, particularly at chief executive ranks, is this idea of a transitory strategy, and it doesn't work. Strategy is the whole point of a strategy. It has to be executed over a long period of time, and that means it has to transit executive changes. If the company is changing strategy with every executive change, it's never going to get anything done. It needs a goal that remains relatively fixed and in place. And if you don't have a succession plan, there's also this if you build up a good succession plan, there's this interest in actually continuing the business after the person leaves. Where often today we've got this attitude that says, yeah, I don't really give a crap about what happens once I'm out of the company. And so you get a lot of these very, very tactical, short-term decisions. Watch Sam Palmisano over at IBM, who was, and I blame the compensation committee for what he was doing. He was badly compensated. He maxed his comp, but in the process, he sold off a ton of IBM assets and changed the underlying dynamic where IBM's expenses got out of control and were out of line with their revenues, largely because he was selling stuff off. IBM wasn't in the real estate business. They weren't in the business of making money off the assets they'd acquired over decades. Yet that's how he made his comp. And of course, his successors couldn't do that because he already sold off all the assets. And so he created a huge problem for his successor. So succession planning and really focusing the compensation programs for top executives on some type of sustaining metrics, as opposed to just tactical metrics and meeting quarterly numbers. Those two things would, I think, make a huge difference in terms of how long a lot of companies survive. I remember at the IBM 100-year anniversary, they pointed out how few companies, like you count them on one hand and have fingers left over, that were around when IBM started, that were still around at 100 years. And even at 50 years, so many of the companies had failed, and largely because a lack of planning to assure their long-term survival. And so if you've set up a program, a compensation program that rewards decisions that are less tactical and more strategic, I think you can fix this, along with assuring there is a deep bench and that succession planning is done properly. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today?
Dr. Shreve, I have to echo everything that has been said, because it's so important that you understand that you're working with, as was said at the start of this program, with human capital, not just employees. It's important to understand that your human capital extends beyond people who you directly pay. Your partners, your suppliers, your ecosystem. And yes, part of leadership goes to your customers as well too. That is something that many people forget in leadership position, and particularly in the government side. They forget they have customers. It's important to also understand that people look at what they're doing, they look at the future, they look at how they communicate differently. One of the hardest speeches I ever gave, because I was a keynote speaker at the Society of Design and Process Engineering Sciences 25th anniversary. The other 4 keynote speakers were 2 Nobel laureates, an assistant to Einstein and an assistant to Petrie. I felt totally out of place. But I gave a talk about how, for the first time in the history of the world, we have 5 generations in the workforce at the same time. We have that today. Each of the generations communicates different, their culture is different, how their worldview is different, how they see rewards, how they see work is different. A leader needs to know that today if they're going to have retention, if they're going to grow, if they're going to have a set of employees and others who are dedicated to achieving the greater goal. And all of those factors create a complex system. And today, as you know, Dr. Shreve, I talk about how we're in a time of everything's become a system of systems. Leadership must understand that as well. It must communicate that in a way that employees understand it without getting too theoretical with them. And those are the things I think that are going to be necessary to compete for the next 50 years. So thank you, Dr. Shreve.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Shahidullah. Professor Mia, what's your closing remarks for today? Can you unmute, please, Professor?
As I'm a new participant in the World Talent Economy Forum. Very interesting that the combination from different countries participant and the development of the Center of Economy, Center of Excellence is really very intellectual work, and I hope we can work a very good efficiently in the Center of Excellence development in the World Talent Economy Forum. I hope it will stand in the world to work together, and it will stand a really World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shahidullah. Through your Center of Excellence, we can contribute in the grassroots level community in Bangladesh. And I believe all of our scholars, they can contribute for Bangladesh. Mr. Sharath Patels, you are also part of our ecosystem. Yeah. So what's your closing remarks for today?
I'm extremely excited. I'm very optimistic. Obviously in these uncertain times, I guess one thing is certain, that people don't follow plans or platforms. They follow leaders that they trust. And as you rightly said, we bring strictly from a technology perspective. I believe bringing the North and the South, and productizing all this knowledge, all these leadership skills that all the partners possess, it can really help cross-pollinate across the borders, across geographies. It can bring valuable learnings to all these audience, whether he's young or employed or soon to be leaders, so that the leadership that comes in the next generation is stable, and the learning is continuous, and the growth is obviously shared. Might sound a little utopian, but I guess the organizations that will win in the next decade absolutely are going to be the ones that not just move faster, but the ones that will retain talent, earn trust, and of course they have a strong leadership model, to scale intentionally rather than by accident. So I look forward to having these conversations. I look forward, obviously, bringing our technology as a platform to be able to and democratize these learnings across the audience on both spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharath. Honorable David Walker, you have a huge contribution in economics and leaderships. What's your closing remarks? And I regularly attend your Monday shows, and I always share that we have a different story from emerging economy. We have different cultures, different norms and values. When we work together, we can bring real progress, and we can produce real global leaders. So that is the thoughts. Your contribution will be very valuable for us.
Last comment, which I just put in the chat. One of the words that I think is a very important word, especially for leaders, is stewardship. As a leader, you have a responsibility not just to generate positive results today, not just to leave things better off when you leave than when you came, but better positioned for the future. And we've heard several examples here where quote unquote leaders have failed in that regard. And I think we need to understand it's not just about today, it's about creating a better tomorrow. And while that's a problem in the private sector, it's a huge problem in the public sector, because most public officials today are thinking about the next election, not the next generation.
Thank you. Thank you. We have to think about the next generations. That is called talent economy. And definitely your wisdom, all of your wisdom is valuable to develop the future. So thank you, Mr. Sharath Patel. Thank you, Professor Shahidullah Mia. Thank you, Honorable David Walker, Mr. David Smith, and Mr. Rob Enderle and Chaudhuri Kaset for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content with the government agency, corporation, and academia. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.